However, I think Cousins holds the keys as to how much Marc Gasol is actually going to play.
Completely agree.
Because what worries me is Toronto has a lot of bigs. Serge Ibaka is still a very serviceable guy at the power forward position. I think Siakam could play either way, but I think Gasol and Ibaka's minutes will hinge largely on how much they're playing Cousins and how much they're playing Bogut. Gasol could turn from a factor into a spectator if Kevin Durant plays and Golden State goes to their Hamptons 5 lineup. I mean, Gasol's not quick enough to be on the floor. He's a very savvy defender, and he's got that veteran presence, but I honestly don't know how many minutes these Toronto bigs are going to play. And that's unfortunate because the bigs have been their bread and butter here in all of their series that they've played in, because you had Brook Lopez in Milwaukee, you had Joel Embiid in Philly, and then you had, the Magic with Aaron Gordon and Vucevic. So this is the first series where they've had to defend against a small ball lineup, and I think Nick Nurse is staying up all night this week trying to plan for that.
You're so right. I just couldn't agree with you more, Jason. You make such a great point here. And it's going to be really fascinating. You have seen, and again, no pun intended here, but you've seen Golden State kind of turn these old school big men into dinosaurs and make them completely extinct in the last few postseasons because they can't stay out on guys like Curry. They can't dance with him. And when they get put in space, they get obliterated. We saw it against Cantor in the last series. We saw what the Rockets had to resort to, Jason. I mean, we saw Mike D'Antoni basically say the can't play Cantor thing with Billy Donovan, but with Capella. Can't play Capella during that Rockets series because he just couldn't get out in space to defend them. And that is what the Warriors do to teams. And Ibaka and Gasol are going to be really hard pressed to do it. And that's, I think you make just a brilliant point that Cousins is going to be the one guy who's going to let them stay on the floor a little bit more because they can play a little bit more of a trapping scheme if Cousins is there. If all of a sudden, when that turns into Draymond Green, if you trap Curry with the ball and he gets the ball to Green, Jason, we have now seen this for 5 years now. What happens? Draymond Green gets a 4-on-3 and it turns into dunks and layups for Golden State. And before you know it, they are pouring points on.
Well, Green is probably the best passing big men of this generation, but Marcus Gasol is also on that list. You know, he shows up more savvy than if it was Brook Lopez going up against the Warriors. I don't think Lopez would play much in this series at all, but I think Gasol might get the benefit of the doubt from Nick Nurse. But if you're Steve Kerr, I think you're using that to your advantage because just like how coy Brett Brown was, will Embiid play, will Embiid not play, I think he could use that Cousins situation to his advantage because you've seen how potent Cousins could be offensively. And I know you've been talking about a net negative here and he could be rusty. But at the other end of the coin, Ben, he's also instant offense. So if you're Steve Kerr, I think you keep Cousins' playing status close to the vest, bring him in 10 to 12 minutes a game, let him try and get double-digit scoring, and then sit him out and do what you do best. Go with that small ball lineup. Iguodala is going to play a huge role in the series, especially with the health of Durant in question. And it is going to be a wild one, my friend.
Let's also, I just want to take a minute here because we haven't even mentioned his name yet, but one of the surprise stars of this postseason is Kevon Looney. Kevon Looney is getting himself paid, Jason. He has played excellent basketball in this postseason, and his ability to finish around the rim looks dramatically better than it has in the past couple seasons. And his ability to really figure out the defensive schemes has been crucial for this team. He has become, if not an elite defender, a very high level one who has learned how to really stick with smaller guys in space. Last season, it still seemed like there were times where he got smaller guys on him and he had trouble kind of keeping up with them. And this season, he looks so much more comfortable out there on the perimeter, Jason, and it's really unlocked a lot of things for this team. You saw against Portland that they do a trapping scheme, and then against the Rockets, they were doing switching. One of the things that makes all of that possible, Jason, is that Looney can play in those schemes. And that's something a lot of big men aren't comfortable doing. They're not comfortable both doing the trapping and the switching schemes. And because of his versatility, it has made them a different team. And it means that when they don't have Durant, when they don't have Cousins, they can play a very switchable lineup that's very fast, can trap, can switch, can play multiple defensive schemes without missing a beat. And I think he's going to be one of the X factors as well in this series, because if he plays well and he's finishing, he's going to be that final line on a lot of those 4-on-3s when they trap Curry. When Green gets the ball, the guy that they're going to make beat them is going to be Looney. And that's going to mean he's going to need to know where to be on offense, and he's going to have to finish those. Because if he doesn't, it's going to put a lot more pressure on some of the other Warriors to score points.
Oh, there's no question. I don't think the Warriors would be here without Kevon Looney. And I know people will tell me I'm crazy for saying that, but who else is coming off the bench for the Warriors that's going to be effective? I think we're seeing the final years of a productive Sean Livingston. Ditto for Andre Iguodala. Mm-hmm. You know, they're relying on guys like McKinney, Jonas Jerebko. These guys would not be in the league, but the Warriors can't afford anybody else, so they're forced to give minutes to these guys because of the amount of injuries they've had to suffer this season. So Looney, I think, is a good pick, Ben, for an X factor in this series because his game has really elevated. You know, he's the reason why they got rid of a guy like Patrick McCaw, who's sitting on the other side of the bench now in Toronto playing for a ring, but he's not getting in the game. So Looney is a big X factor here as we get into the finals. Whether or not Durant plays, Looney is going to go a long way in determining how far this series actually goes, whether the Warriors are going to win it in 5, 6, or 7 games.
And I thought you asked a really good question as one of your kind of storylines here for this series, which is who's going to have the better bench? And what do you make of this so far? I mean, we just talked about Kevon Looney. Who do you think is going to have the bench edge in this series, Jason?
I think it's Toronto. Right now, if Durant and Cousins come back and then you push guys like Bogut to the bench, Iguodala, then you have Livingston there and Looney, it looks a little bit better. But the Raptors are the healthier team going into this finals. And when Fred VanVleet is playing the way he has, and if he can keep up his hot shooting, and I respect what Nick Nurse is doing, not benching a guy like Danny Green, who's won NBA championships before. He was crucial in 2014 against the Miami Heat. So you bring a guy like VanVleet off the bench, Norman Powell, Serge Ibaka, who also has NBA Finals experience in 2012 with the Thunder. I think the bench edge is going to the Toronto Raptors. However, on the other side of the coin, Ben, Golden State starters are that much more talented than Toronto's, and that's what's going to make this a very compelling series. But how do you not give the bench edge to the Raptors?
And one of the things that's really something we need to watch that's really easy to forget, Jason, is also to say how important will the bench be. And the reason I say this is that Kerr has been playing 7 guys for a large part of this postseason. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens because during the NBA Finals now, they've spaced these games out. So obviously we have a bit of a wait. The first game will be on Thursday, as Jason mentioned. And there are 2 games between all games, except for one. I believe the one is there's only 1 day between game 3 and game 4. But all the rest of them have 2 days between them. So it gives the teams a lot of time to rest and to get ready. And so there's also the question of how important will the bench be and how short will Kerr keep his bench? Because I think if KD and Cousins do play, they might shorten it up quite a bit to where it's really those guys, Iguodala and Looney, who are playing. I think to start the series, particularly if Cousins and Durant don't play, we'll see some Jordan Bell. We'll see some of Looney because he'll be starting, obviously. And we might see some Livingston, but I wouldn't be surprised if Kerr keeps a pretty short bench in this series, Jason.
Yeah, I'd be surprised, too, if he doesn't do that. But, if you're a guesser here, if you're a Las Vegas odds maker, right, Ben, when do you actually see Kevin Durant making an appearance in this finals? I'm going to say game 3 at Oracle, depending on if the Warriors get a split in the first 2 games. I think he appears in game 3.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say as well. I feel like game 3 is probably the game, but we'll see. It's hard to say. And Jason, there is a possibility, not a high one, but there's at least a possibility that we've seen Kevin Durant play his last game as a Warrior, which is pretty amazing.
The stage is too high. I don't think so, dude. The stage is too high. People have already given Kevin Durant so much crap. He left the Thunder. He won 2 championships. Now he's going to go get paid a whole lot of money elsewhere. He doesn't want to go out like that. I know he couldn't control what happened to him, and he's very lucky that it's not a severe Achilles injury. But at the same time, I picture Durant playing before Cousins, and I think we will see both of them in this series in some way or another. But then you have to look at it as well. Well, Golden State's chemistry that they've kind of gotten back, that spark, vintage 2015 Golden State Warriors, do you think that that messes with their current chemistry? I mean, this series has to go through Curry. This is Curry's series to win or lose. And I think if Durant comes back, he's going to have to play second fiddle. As dominant as he is, this has to be Curry's game to start and finish.
I mean, that's where it gets pretty interesting, doesn't it? Because you're going to see. I mean, imagine if Golden State, if they really take care of business and they're up 2-0, and they're going back to Oracle in that event. If you're Kerr, don't you kind of almost have to be a little careful with the whole Durant thing? Do you want to mess with a good thing? It's like do you when a quarterback gets injured, do you bring in the guy who's been playing well? Do you let him keep playing, or do you put in the guy who got injured? And a lot of people say I don't like to have someone lose their job due to injury, but it is an interesting case when you have the stakes as high as they are now. So I'm really interested in, and I think one of the other storylines of the series, Jason, is the future of the two guys who were presumably going to be defending each other before KD's injury, which are Kawhi and KD. Both of these guys are potential free agents. I mean, I think we're all assuming that they're both going to be free agents. Obviously, Kawhi has a player option, but the assumption is both of these guys are going to be free agents this year. And I don't know if there's a bigger storyline. There's one other one I have here that I think is pretty interesting. But one of the biggest, if not the biggest storyline, Jason, is what are the futures of those two players after this series?
Well, I think it's making it harder and harder for Kawhi to up and leave Toronto. You saw what they built. He may get more and more comfortable playing there. He's been the hero. They wouldn't be where they are right now without him. Yeah. And he's getting what he wanted. His supporting cast is stepping up. But I think the pressure obviously is on Golden State. It's on Steve Kerr. He wants to win his 4th championship in 5 years. Yeah. Nick Nurse is in his rookie season as an NBA head coach, Ben. He can coach pressure-free, and that's very difficult to say when you have an entire country behind you.
Such a good point.
But this is the Raptors' first time in the NBA Finals. And they have home court advantage, Ben. This is Golden State's first time in the NBA Finals in this run where they do not have home court advantage. So if you're Nick Nurse, this coaching staff, this roster, you have 4 guys who have played in the NBA Finals, 3 guys with rings. They are playing pressure-free basketball, and I think they finally came to realize that in the Bucks series because they were the lower seed. And you know what? Because they won 58 games, they earned that home court advantage. But at the same time, all the pressure is on the Warriors.
And how do you think that figures into this series for Kawhi and KD, though? I mean, are those guys gonna kind of assume that pressure? I mean, I feel like on some level there is this triumvirate in this series that you have Curry, Kawhi, and KD, who are all sort of trying to compete for the moniker of best player. They feel, I mean, if LeBron James was in the postseason, he'd be in this conversation. Giannis just got knocked out. This is kind of the stage for who the best player in the league is. It felt this year, and I think LeBron is still really in the conversation, but the fact that he didn't make the postseason, it tainted that. And now, it seemed like KD had stepped up to take that title. And now we see Kawhi come in. And I feel like it's not too early to say with the way that Kawhi has played, he's playing like the best player in the NBA. He just took out the presumptive MVP, shut him down on defense to have, 4 of his worst games of the entire season in a 4-game stretch, Jason, which I don't think people are talking about enough how good defensively he was. And then obviously Curry takes us to the next level, has never won a finals MVP, Jason, and now has his chance to say, hey, look, guys, I get that KD is a good player, but this is my team. This is my league. I am the best player. I mean, how do you see that battle playing out over the course of this series?
It's so tough to even pick who the best player in the NBA is. I mean, you got Steph, KD, Kawhi, Giannis, LeBron, Anthony Davis. We could sit here and pick and choose all these different lineups and make cases for all of them. However, You mentioned one thing about LeBron, and that's his legacy.